Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Hopefully, you guys are doing well and had a great long weekend. Today is Monday, July the 6th. I am currently at a new setup, so hopefully, everything is working well. Let me make sure everything is good here as well before we get started. What's up, everyone? Good morning. What's up, J10, Calvin? What's up, B Roots? Hope everyone had a great weekend. What's up, Maria, Cody, Lamit, Kevin, Martin, Cinna? Good morning, Nicolin. What's up, Robert, Gusta, Julius, Venus, Carlos, Juan, Rocket? What's up, everyone? Good morning. What's up? What's up, everyone? Good morning. Yeah, hopefully everything's up and running. Let me make sure everything's good. Before we get started, can we get a mic check? And also, the latency should be good here as well. Yeah, the internet should be perfectly fine. All right. With that being said, let's hop straight into the economic calendar and what we have for us today. And then we'll head on to the charts here in a second as well. All seems good. We hear you. Perfect. Okay, let me bring this up. Okay. First things first, let's take a look at the economic calendar. We do have a couple things to talk about coming to this week. Not too much red folder news that we do have. We also have a couple earnings here as well. Can't see, yeah, I currently don't have my mic set up, but let's talk about the economic calendar for this week and then we'll get started here. So, first things first, we do have ISM that is going to be today at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we do have the FOMC minutes that is going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, of course. Not the actual FOMC minutes, but the not the actual FOMC statement, but we do have the minutes. And then we also have the unemployment claims here as well. That's going to be on Thursday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, with that being said, not too much red folder news that we have to keep in mind coming to this week. We just have some today at 10 a.m. and then some on Wednesday. That's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, with that being said, let's hop straight into the charts. First things first, there's quite a few things to kind of talk about over the weekend. Let's first talk about the major indices here as well. So, let's start off on the broader market, the SPY and the Qs, and then we'll make our way down to some of the tech names that we do have coming into market open. So, first things first, let's talk about the SPY chart. We'll quickly go into the weekly time frame and then we'll make our way down. So, SPY on the weekly time frame, as you can see, we've just been so far kind of basing within the past couple of weeks here, forming this this weekly kind of flag pattern here on the higher time frames. What we like to see on the daily time frame, let's go back onto this. For any sort of potential continuation towards the upside in the markets, we really need a break outside this range that we do have now. So the range is in between this 730 along with our 760. We can just mark out this general range that we've been consolidating in. If we do want to break towards the upside, now we need that break above our 760 for any sort of continuation towards the upside. Some of the major levels that we have is going to be our 730, which last week we ended up bouncing off of earlier into the week, and then a key level of resistance that we can mark out here now is going to be that 750. So if we go into the hourly time frame, and see, SPY number one has been leading the markets towards the upside. Last week, more so in specific, the QQQ is a name that has been lagging behind, and then followed up by of course, the SMH, which is one that's been lagging ever since we had MU earnings. So for the SPY, one of the main levels that we can have coming to this week is just going to be our 750. You can see we have a touch here. You have another touch here as well. and then another touch back here. So if we do want to see some upside movement in the markets, I'd like to break above the 750, hold above that 750 for that continued push towards the upside. So that's one of the main levels coming to this week. If we kind of reject off the 750, we could see a potential retracement right back down in towards where, which would be our previous day lows, 740. So some of the main levels that we can have marked out, just mark out that 750 along with that 740. So that's what we have more so on the hourly time frame. If we're talking about a weekly perspective, if you go onto the QQQ, you can see this one's more ranging than anything. And of course, this one is a lot more, not a lot more weaker, but it's a little bit weaker compared to the SPY equivalent. So as you can see here for the QQQ, we are currently in between that 750 and that 700. We're ranging on, of course, the weekly time frame, right? Kind of basing here on the weekly as we talked about after having this nice initial push towards the upside after the April bottom. The daily chart, we are currently consolidating here as well. So for the daily, not really too much to talk about. If you go into the hourly time frame, you can clearly see that last week we are a little bit weaker compared to the SPY, which is closer to the top of the range. The QQQ in this case is right now right in the middle of the range. We did come back down into that key level support on Friday, and now you can see we are having a nice bounce off this level back inside the middle of the range currently, which is our 720. So for the SPY coming into today, major levels that we have on the SPY is going to be our 708. Other levels that we have marked out here is our 730 as well. So if we do want to see some upside in the markets above our 730 for continuation, or now we're going to be looking for a potential bounce play off our 708. If we go on to the SPY and NQ, basically the exact same levels that we're going to have marked out. Really not too much to talk about. We can go on the 4-hour if we'd like. Or actually, let's just look at this on the hourly time frame. Key levels for the NQ is just going to be our low that we created last week. And of course, if we do want to break back towards the upside, we need that break back above that 3,200. Or in this case now, the bounce play here off our previous day lows, which would be that 29,400. If we're talking about the ES, key levels that we have marked out is really just going to be this level right here. You can see we have this range. We ended up having this nice break and retest, and so far we're having this continuation. The next leg towards the upside is of course going to be back above our 70, basically that's 7,600. If we can break above, potential retest once again, continuation towards the upside. All right, let's take a look at the SMH here, and then we'll make our way down onto a couple other tickers, starting off with, of course, the weekly time frame here on the SMH. This one is pulling back. If we're looking at the weekly candle bar by bar count, you can see the week previous, we ended up having a pretty weak candle closure on the weekly time frame, essentially engulfed its whole previous week, which was the third week in June. And as you can see here, the key levels that we have marked out last week, we closed underneath its previous week's lows here as well. We were bouncing right off that kind of weekly 9 EMA. But we did end up having a bearish candle close on the weekly time frame. If you go into the daily time frame on Friday, we actually ended up having a pretty bearish daily candle close here as well, underneath the 9 and also underneath the 21. So this is our first sign of initial weakness. We did close underneath the 9 and 21 a couple times back here earlier in June, but this one is pretty convincing right underneath the 9 and 21. Kind of similar to what it did actually back in June. We're now like overshooting our key level of support. So key levels that we have right here is going to be our 610 coming to this week. If we just reclaim back above this level, we can see this flip and a push right back towards the upside. Let's take a look at this here more so on the hourly time frame. Key levels that we're going to have marked out here on the SMH, of course, is going to be our 615. So this is Sorry, this is the area that we broke down from 615. As you can see, we have multiple touches here. If we do want to see any sort of pushback towards the upside here, back above our 615, we can see room back up in towards our 630, and we can actually see a reversal back in the markets up in towards that 650 here. If we reject off our 615, then the semiconductors are going to continue to show weakness coming into this week. And we could be looking for a move back down in towards our 580 here on the higher time frames. Okay. That being said, let's go on to some other tech names, more so in specific. There's quite a few things to kind of talk about coming into this week. So I'm going to talk about them now. If you guys are enjoying this so far, of course, appreciate if you guys drop a like and sub. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watches, that of course is in the description below. Let me grab some water here and then we'll head on to some tech names. All right, let's first talk about Tesla. Let's take a look at this one on the weekly. So as you can see here for Tesla, really, we've been talking about this range that we've created between our 350 along with our 450. The daily chart, as you can see, ended up having a nice bounce right off that 370, but we talked about Tesla being more so inside of this range. So we very much well can reject at key areas. And then on Friday, we end up having a pretty big sell-off after we had some delivery numbers. So for Tesla, as you can see, pretty big rejection on Friday, right back towards the downside after having a nice rally coming into last week. Key levels that we have for Tesla, if we're looking at this on the daily chart, nothing's really changed. Major levels that we have marked out is just going to be this 380, and you can see price is just kind of flirting around this level. Once we end up reclaiming, we had a nice pushback towards the upside. Key levels that we have marked out now is going to be that 430 and of course that 380 on the higher time frames. Coming into this week, at least some of the levels that I have marked out on Tesla, I'm not sure where some of my drawings went, but for Tesla, key levels that we do have marked out, let me actually pull them up real quick. Sorry, I'm on a MacBook, so some of the levels that I have marked out here on Tesla is going to be our previous day lows. We also have our 400, multiple touches here, and then we also have our 412.50. So coming into this week here for Tesla, we do have multiple touches around this 415. That's one of the key levels that we like to see it above. If you want to see continuation, we can be looking for the flip back above 400 or now back above our 416 if you want to see any sort of continuation back towards the upside. All right, let's talk about Nvidia here. All right, Nvidia, sorry, key levels here. Let's go on to the weekly time frame. So weekly time frame here on Nvidia, as you can see, last week's candle, we ended up closing underneath the 9 and also underneath the 21 as well. So weekly time frame is now trying to flip a little bit more bearish. Not able to build up a higher low currently, or right now we're kind of invalidating this higher low on the weekly time frame. So that really shows us how more so weak we are on Nvidia. You can see last week we did have this daily gap back towards the upside that right now we are just rejecting off key technical levels. So that's how weak Nvidia is compared to most of the tickers. So key levels on the daily chart is of course going to be that 200 key psychological level. If we do reject right off this 200, we can see a potential break and retest towards the downside all the way in towards that 185 and potentially 180s actually here on Nvidia. So let's go back onto the this hourly time frame. Key levels that we're going to have marked out here on the hourly is going to be really that 200 exact key psychological level. Last week, if you wanted to see a potential flip back above that 200 for a potential move higher. We ended up rejecting, and now you can see we're pushing back towards the downside. Key levels that we do have marked out on Nvidia is going to, of course, be our 200 key psych. Other levels that we have marked out now as well is going to be this 197. If we pop and kind of fade, we can see a move right back down in towards that 192, along with our 191 here on the higher time frames. Let's take a look at AMD here next. So AMD on the higher time frames, we ended up having this nice breakout earlier into the week, followed up by a little bit of rejection right back inside the middle of the range. We are still, of course, above our key technical levels on the daily chart. We're above the 9, we're above the 21 as well. If you go back onto the hourly time frame, we kind of had a break outside of this range, but ultimately we did end up rejecting and coming back inside the range. So nice breakout last week, followed up by a rejection right back inside the range. And now you can see we gravitated back down in towards the bottom, which was our 510. And now you can see we're getting this nice little bounce coming into today, right back inside the middle of the range. So for AMD, if we want to see any sort of continuation, buyers should step in here off that 510. Or now we like to really see it above our 560 for continuation towards the upside. Let's go on to Apple here on the daily chart. The Apple daily chart here is having a really solid bounce. So on the weekly time frame, we talked about the bounce right off that 280, which of course is our previous level of resistance, now turning into support. And you can see we have a very solid bounce right off that weekly time frame. If we're talking about the weekly candle close here as well, fairly bullish, right? Closed back above its previous week's high with a very strong candle close, closed it back above its weekly high from 2 weeks ago. So did two things at once. The next daily candle, we can see a push back up in towards that all-time highs, of course, here on Apple, based off the strength and the close that we had on the weekly time frame. If we look at the daily time frame here as well, we ended up having a break underneath, but once we got that reclaim here on on Apple, we're having this nice pushback towards the upside. Now what we like to see really is maintain above our previous level of resistance, which is our 300 key psych. Any sort of dip, we just like to see that push back up in towards the all-time highs here, of course. So with that being said, if we go on to the hourly time frame for Apple, the key levels that we have marked out coming into this week, all we're going to have marked out is going to be our last week's highs. Let's kind of readjust some of the levels that we have marked out here as well. The major levels that we have on Apple is going to be our 302. More so on the higher time frames, other levels that we can have marked out as well is going to be that previous day high. So for Apple coming into today, if we do want to see some upside above our previous day highs, is going to send this back up in towards our 312 and potentially back up in towards the upside here as well, which will be that all-time highs. Let's go on to Google. Google here on the weekly time frame is back at a key technical level here as well, fairly similar to the Apple setup. If we're looking at this on the weekly chart, previous level of resistance turned into support. Now for Google, I like to see a potential similar move back towards the upside if we can get back now above our previous day high. So that's what we have for Google. Not too much to talk about. We do have a very key level of support, which now if we can reclaim back above, we can see this flip back towards the upside here on Google. As for Microsoft, so far we're getting that nice V-shaped recovery that we talked about here at the bottom of the range, multiple touches of support. Key levels that we have marked out is of course our 360. We like to see bounce back up and towards the highs. Other levels that we have marked out on the daily chart is of course going to be our 400. If we can bounce, which we currently are, we like to see that push back up in towards that 400, of course. So that's key levels for Microsoft. For Meta, we end up having a nice pop with, of course, news, but right inside the middle of the range, more so on the daily chart. So whenever names are ranging here, if you look at the weekly, Or if you look at the daily chart, right underneath the EMAs, the daily is not really above the 9 and 21. That's a good sign that the markets are going to be a lot harder to trade or have a lot more continuation. A lot of the pops do normally get shorted. As for something like Amazon, key levels that we have marked out is our 260. We're going to need to see a potential break back above for any sort of continuation back towards the upside. But a lot of these ones, as you can see, are flipping. If you go into the daily chart here on SpaceX, this one is right now right at the bottom of the range. We did end up rejecting off a key technical level, which happens to be our 175. So if we do want to see some upside right now, we need to see that break it back above our 175 at a minimum to potentially flip back bullish here on the hourly time frame. Okay, with that being said, I am going to go over a few more other tickers for the next 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna get ready for market open here now, since I do have a new setup and I have to figure out a couple other things. So if you guys do have any couple charts or any tickers you'd like me to go over for the next couple of minutes, you can drop them in the comments below. If you guys are enjoying this so far, appreciate if you guys drop a like and sub. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watches, that of course is in the description below here as well. All right, let's go on to Palantir. So I see Palantir first. So Palantir had a nice bounce last week. Let's go on to the daily time frame. For looking at this from a daily perspective, Palantir is right into a key technical level. So we had a bounce here. We had another bounce right off that 130. You can see last week we talked about that move up in towards that 130 here. And we are currently right at that key technical level. So for Palantir, we very much well can reject. If we do reject off this area here on the daily, we can see a potential push right back towards the downside. If the daily flips, we can push right back up and towards that 140. So that's what we have for Palantir, more so on the day higher time frames. At least for the lower time frames, the key levels that we can have marked out today is going to be that that 128. That's going to be key here for Palantir. Let's take a look at some of the other names, more so memory that has been a little bit weaker. You can see MU first sign of weakness here underneath the 9 and 21. So that's a good sign. Sorry, not really a good sign. That is a sign that some of the memory names, of course, are slowing down. You can see every single time we've held the 9 and 21. This was the first really daily candle close underneath the 21 EMA on MU. If we look at this on the lower time frame so far, coming into today and moving forward, the level that we just need to mark out is basically our 1000 along with this 1025. If you can see, we have multiple touches, broke down on Friday. If you want to see continuation towards the downside, hold underneath this 1025. If we flip back above, we can see this move right back towards the upside here. Reclaim setup for a move back higher. SNDK, a lot of similar setups. If we're looking at this on the daily chart, similar thing. This is our first sign of weakness underneath our 9 and underneath our 21 here as well. So this is our first sign of weakness on some of the semiconductors. Now moving forward, all we're going to do is just mark out our previous level of support. So we can just draw this out. If we want to see continuation, as I mentioned, right towards the downside, pop and fade off our 1900. If we reclaim back above, we can see this move back towards the upside. INTC, a lot of these ones very similar. INTC still looks fairly good here. Daily chart is building up a higher low. You do want to see that break back above our previous all-time highs for continuation back towards the upside. WDC, a lot of these ones, as you can see, are pulling back here. Of course, MRVL pulling back. A lot of these names. TSM still looks fairly good. Higher lows are being built. Hood is something that ended up having a nice push on Friday. Main watches last week towards the upside were Hood, Palantir. a lot of components within the SPY, more so than the Qs and the SMH. But for the hood, nice push towards the upside. Now we just like to see it maintain above this 1112 for that trend continuation back towards the highs. So with that being said, let's go on to the hourly time frame and let's kind of talk about the game plan coming into today. So some of the major levels that I have marked out here, I do have quite a bit of levels on the SPY and Qs coming to market open. But right now we are in between its previous day's range. So coming into today, I'm going to be a little bit more hands off after we had that pretty big drop on Friday. Currently, we are opening up fairly close to the middle of the range. So I'm going to be a little bit more patient coming to market open. I want to see the reaction that we have within the first 10 to 15 minutes here on the SPY and Qs, since of course we are a little bit further away from the previous day highs along with the previous day lows. So let's wait for the first kind of 10 to 15 minutes to form and mark out that opening range candle here as well. Most of the names are a little bit weaker after last week's drop on Friday. So at least for today, I don't have too many top watches. The one name that is continuing to show strength is Apple. So we'll continue to look for Apple upside for a move back up in towards that all-time highs. As for the rest of the tech names, as you can see, we are more so just kind of ranging. So I'm going to be a lot more patient. Some of the names that we traded last week were just Palantir, Hood. We're going to continue to look for names with relative strength intraday, at least for the higher time frames. A lot of these ones are more so consolidating or lagging behind the SPY and Qs, which we do want to be a lot more cautious of. Something like Palantir, we're going to continue to focus on this one since it was trending last week. We can keep an eye out on our 128. That's one of the main levels that we have coming into today. If we can maintain above this, we can see that push back towards the upside. So we'll keep an eye out on Palantir. We'll keep an eye out on Hood here as well above our 112. And then for the rest of the tickers, as I mentioned, be a little bit more cautious of coming into today. You do have to be more mindful because as we talked about earlier, the SPY has been leading the markets compared to the Qs and the SMH, which has been lagging behind. So that's not really a good sign, especially for momentum whenever the SPY is leading the overall indices. So with that being said, I am going to call it a day here. I know it's a little bit short. Sorry, a little bit of a shorter pre-market prep, but I gotta figure out a couple of things before live trading today, which is important. Yeah, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, appreciate if you guys drop a like and sub. And with that being said, if you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that of course is in the description below. And I will see you guys all tomorrow. All right, take care, everyone. Peace.